This time around, though, we're looking at credibility. And what I'd like to do is to just help our thinking a little bit and go a little bit deeper than just simply, okay, well, we could do with a few Google reviews. That may well be part of it, but how do we need? What else might we need to think about? And it comes from, essentially, it's within our business development section, but it also obviously has an impact very much on our strategy. So I'm going to ask you a question. I want to put yourself, imagine that I'm inviting you, or you've got 2 invites to an event on the future of artificial intelligence. And you look at the agendas for these 2 events and they look identical. Content looks identical to these, and the locations look as if they're equivalent locations. One of them is delivered by me, and the other one is delivered by the Chief Technical Officer of Chatbot GPT. I want you to think for a moment about which one you'd probably go to. Now, there may be a couple of misguided folks in the room that think, oh, well, I quite like Kevin, so I'll go to his. But I think the majority would probably have a bit more sense. And you'd probably be thinking, well, actually, if we could have the Chief Technical Officer of Chatbot GPT, that sounds a bit more interesting. Well, why is that? Because I've just told you the agenda is exactly the same. I might have exactly the same script as him, but there's something else about him versus me, and it's that implied credibility, that maybe that reputation, if you want to call it that way. So if you think about that from your client's perspective, and indeed actually from employees' perspective, potential future employees, our decision making is not just about the content or the relevance of what we're talking about. It's also about that credibility. It may seem obvious, and some of us may remember this expression: nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. And that got translated to a number of different industries. I remember I used to work in the management consulting industry, and there was a phrase around the same phrase, but nobody ever got fired for hiring McKinsey. And basically the view was, well, if you hired McKinsey and the project went wrong, it's not your fault. It just couldn't have been done. Whereas if you took a brave decision and hired another consulting firm and it went wrong, it's probably your neck that's along the line. So what we're seeing is that it's not just that offer, it's the credibility and the endorsement, if you like, and that comes from external sources, not just from our internal, what we say. And I'm going to make a nod to the digital world here, and we've got Gary Mawini from Platform 81 in a moment, who's the real knowledge an expert around the digital side. I just pretend to know 1 or 2 things, but my limited understanding of SEO and the likely search engine results and how high you're going to rank up a page is essentially there are 2 key elements. It's a lot more complicated than this, of course, but there's the relevance. So the keywords on your site, the content on your site, is it relevant content? How good's the content, but also something that is referred to as authority or domain authority. So, and that's about how many quality, recognized, high reputation other sites are linking back to your website. So it's that external endorsement, if you like. So it's based on the links, and the first one, the relevance, is, if you like, is about our internal. We can write what we like on the pages and control the SEO and those other things. The authority is more of an external aspect to it, and it's the same in the analog world. Take ourselves offline now. It's basically the same there. There are 2 key parts to the decision making that people are making, to make it very simple. One is the relevance and the quality of what you're offering. The other is actually, do I believe it? Is it credible? And one of the things that is absolutely key, and one of the key concepts that we talk about when we find that maybe we're not getting the quality and quantity of customers, of leads that we want, is something called the value proposition. And the way we look at it consists of 7 key elements. I'm not going to go through the detail here, and we will look at this, in fact, a little bit more at next month. But essentially, we need to be able to articulate our value proposition with these seven things. So who's the target audience? What are their needs or their pains? What are the features and the benefits that we're offering against those needs and pains? What are the primary alternatives, the differences? But lastly, the credibility. Now, I want us to just be careful here, because this looks like credibility is the 7th and last thing, and it's the 7th of the whole aspect. as I've just kind of explained, I think with the digital world, really the credibility is it's almost half and half. So we've got to be a little bit careful of not kidding ourselves that it's just a tiny thing at the end. And it doesn't matter how good the rest of our offering is, if there's something missing in terms of credibility, if our customers don't quite believe it for some reason, then we're going to struggle. And this struck a real chord with me when I looked at this. Most of us, I think, will be familiar with something called the adoption curve, and the idea that at the beginning with a new product, service, or new business, it's innovators and early adopters that are likely to go with us, and later on, but where we want the real success are going to come from the early majority, late majority, and the laggards. So those people at the beginning, it's all around, yeah, it's a shiny new thing, got something new that I want, and that's what's interesting to people. They might be our friends, or they might just be great innovators and early adopters. But if we want to get to that early majority, it's not a straight continuum. It's not, there's actually a break in it. And that's this chasm that's called here, this gap in that curve. And it's because when we think about what people need, the early majority, risk is coming much more up into their thinking. It's not just about, is it a shiny new thing that looks exciting and interesting? It's looks interesting, but is it for me? Do I really believe it? And that's where this credibility gap comes. So we need to really be thinking about, how do we bridge that gap? Because otherwise we just go up and down that little first part of the curve. And we see this, we're the same with Bismart, with some of our offerings, particularly. You get to a point where you've got some usage, you've got something, but you haven't quite bridged to that next level. So that's really something I want us to all to be thinking about, is what would we need to do to really boost and build that credibility and that reputation to enable us to get across that gap and into the bigger group of clients that we would like. We may be familiar with, and Luke reminded me of this the other day, the video of the guy at a music festival that gets up and starts dancing on his own with some really strange dance moves. We may be familiar with that, and he starts a movement because the next person, a couple of guys get up and join him and kind of endorse him, if you like, but they're the early adopters or the innovators, and before long you suddenly get the rest of the crowd starting to join in, and at the end of the day there's only a few laggards that are left, because they're now the ones that are left out. So in a way it's quite illustrative of this, because there could be a point at which people stop joining. You've got to nurture those early adopters. You've got to get them into the fold and make sure you keep them. But what do you do if you don't manage to then get the rest of the crowd coming up? And people have got to know us about us. It's not just about, is it good? People have got to be aware of us in the first place, but then also be credible. So we've got to build that reputation, build that awareness, but build that credibility in there. And we've got Hannah is going to be talking to us a little bit later about how PR might be something that can help in building that credibility. And this is another way. This is Jeff Bezos, and illustrating that fact that the credibility is not. It's not. The decision is not just about the quality of our offer, what we say to people, but it's about what other people say when we're not in the room. And that's our brand credibility, whether it's our personal brand as an individual and or our business brand. So we've got to think about those. So what can we do? It's all very well. So what can we do? So the first thing really is to recognize this, recognize that there is that gap. And that's one of the things I said that resonated with me is, yes, it's not just that nice, gentle, let's do a little bit more, but actually we've got to do quite a lot to bridge that gap if we're serious about doing it. So a key takeaway for me is that any planning, if we're doing any strategic planning about building your business or any business, part of that needs to be our plan for building credibility. What do we need to do to increase and build credibility within the target audience that we're aiming for? And the tactics will vary depending on our businesses. whether we're B2C, obviously, or whether we're more B2B, professional services, whatever our industry is, but our individual businesses, because with some of us, it's all about building our individual brand. It might all be around referrals and finding those right referral partners, and Peter's a great expert on that, and he's going to talk in a minute on one or two aspects of that and some other broader things as well. But with other businesses, it might well be more about our digital online presence, and it might well be Google reviews, but it could also be thinking about things like, how do I position myself as a thought leader within my sector? What can we do? Could we run podcasts? Do we need articles? Is it a book? Is it other things that might do that? How can we get third-party endorsement from maybe bodies that are recognized within our sector? There's some elements which are required in certain industries. We might be particularly regulatory requirements. But on top of that, what about trusted businesses and people that might recommend us? How can we bring those into the fold? So there's lots to think about in terms of the tactics. And I could put a list up here of all sorts of tactics, but at the end of the day, the important thing is to think about it within your businesses, ideally brainstorm it with some other people and work out what you believe you need to do to build your credibility specific to your business. So one final thing before I hand over to our excellent guest speakers is a word of warning, because credibility takes a long time to build potentially, and there is a time element to this, but it doesn't take very long to destroy it, as there's been some fantastic case studies in the past, or examples. Some of us may well remember this one with Gerald Ratner, who referred to basically all of the jewelry in the Ratner stores as being, I think he used the word crap. I think that was the word that he used, and he wiped $1 billion off the value of his company in about 10 seconds. Well, maybe over a week, according to this graph. But it took him a very short period of time to ruin his credibility. So don't underestimate the importance of keeping that credibility and retaining it as we go. So that's all that I wanted to say for the moment. And what I'd like to do is to hand over to Gary, who's going to take us through a few things, and then we'll hear from Peter and from Hannah. So Gary from Platform 81, over to you.
Real, thanks, Kevin. Morning, everyone. My name is Gary Mooney. I'm Technical Director of a company called Platform 81. And we are a web development and digital marketing agency with offices in the Midlands and up north in Manchester. And Kevin's kindly asked me to run through a couple of synergies really between digital marketing and that top level theme of credibility. So I'm going to give you a few of my thoughts on the topic, and hopefully a little bit of an insight from a digital perspective. Maybe you guys might be able to take a bit of that and take it onto your own digital platforms or websites as a bit of an insight, really. So lucky for us, this whole internet malarkey is a pretty big deal, certainly over the last 10 or 15 years. And whether we like it or not, we're all kind of connected to this huge network that we call the internet in our daily lives. And one feature which we constantly use it for is the access to information, is that access to data. So I'm sure you've all Googled things in the past, and when you type in your search term into Google, into that search bar, and you hit return, Google will query its huge database of websites and give results based on relevancy and credibility. So it's that credibility what I'm going to focus on for 5 minutes. And one metric that we use every single day as a digital agency is one called domain authority. So I'm not sure whether you guys will have ever heard of domain authority. Give me a hands up if you've ever heard of domain authority, guys, so I can see. Okay, we've got a few. Well, we've got a few that haven't done anything. I take it that means you probably put me on mute because you've heard the word digital marketing, but I'll plod on. Okay, so domain authority is a score from 0 to 100, and it gives you an idea of how credible Google thinks your website is. Now, interesting for me, it's not a score that's done by Google itself. It's a score that's first come up with by a company called Moz. So Moz is a company that make SEO tools, and they've come up with, as I say, this score from 0 to 100 of how important they perceive your website will be. So they've put together all these different signals and the metrics that are put together by a Google algorithm, and they've put it into this one score. And generally speaking, it's a ranking factor. So websites with higher domain authority are likely to get more presence in Google. So to give you an idea, your likes of your Facebooks, your Twitters, your Wikipedias, YouTubes, LinkedIn's, all your big sites, they will be up there in the 90s in terms of your domain authority. As a cross comparison, a local business perhaps in Bromsgrove that's just set up, brand new, will probably have a score of 1 or 2. Perfectly natural, nothing to worry about. And it basically means that you're at 0 in authority. So your credibility really from an online perspective is, you know, it is 1 or 2, and it's going to take time. So I'm sure when you guys have Googled stuff in the past, perhaps you're looking for information or data, one of the first results that you often see is Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is pretty much the king when it comes to hard facts and evidence. There's not normally much debate about the content that appears on those pages. So therefore, credibility, relevance, it normally outperforms any other websites on similar topics. So that kind of gives you a real world example. So Kevin mentioned the value proposition previously. So there's lots of factors within the value proposition. And again, very similar to domain authority. But for me, I think the most important thing to remember is it does take time, and there's lots of synergies that we can relate to the digital world back to the kind of normal offline world. And one thing to remember as well is that apart from taking time, we're not trying to fool Google with your domain authority. It will instantly know. And if you're trying to achieve a really high domain authority and get your website to get more presence in Google, it can take months, years. It can even take tens of years, depending on the type of competition. So unfortunately, there's nothing that you can do within a few days that will suddenly give you a huge domain authority. So I'm going to give you a couple of factors that will directly affect your domain authority. So you can possibly have a think about your own website, your own digital presence, maybe take a couple of these points and have a think about how you can possibly do a little bit from your side. You know, if you did want to increase your own presence online and your own website. But as I say, I think the main thing that sort of comes on to me was the assumptions of how they all link together with the offline world. So the first one is the age of your domain name. So the age of your domain name will have a direct correlation to the domain authority and how Google perceives how important you are. So that's a really interesting point. So I think, as you can probably guess, over time, you build up a reputation. So you're building up good content, you're building up decent backlinks, and over time and the age of that domain, that will have a direct correlation to your rankings and your domain authority. So that's the first one. Not much you can do about it from kind of a marketing point of view. You're stuck with that age. But as you can see, over time, that would naturally increase. The second thing is backlinks. So I'm sure you've all maybe heard about backlinks. So the number of good quality backlinks you've got to your website, the higher that website will rank in Google. So that's a little bit of a generalization, but again, it makes sense that if Google sees your website and it sees lots of other websites are linking to it, you can kind of understand the kind of natural link with that, thinking, you know, Google's going to think, hey, you know, something's good going on here. These guys have got some really good content on their website. There's lots of people linking to it. They must be doing something right. So backlinks is a really important feature to increase your domain authority. Number 3, which kind of links to that, is the quality of content. So to increase your domain authority, you've got to have high quality content on your website. So generally speaking, blogs are a great way to increase your domain authority. So if you're answering people's questions, again, Google will give you a better profile within its search engine and give you a better ranking. And the last one, which I was going to touch on, was user experience. So again, you can probably see the synergies with the offline world here, but the website's got to be easy to navigate. The website's got to be fast. It's got to be easy to move around and kind of navigate through. And again, if Google perceives that this user experience is good, it's nice and fast, your domain authority will be increased. So I think you can probably see there the close synergies with the kind of digital world, what we're in, and the offline world. As Kevin alluded to, I think there are some very close links. So you've probably all heard of a service called SEO, which is a service that you can do yourself to increase your rankings within Google, or you can employ an agency to do it on your behalf. But I think the really interesting point that I found that was quite interesting was that there's nothing that you can genuinely do to instantly give you credibility online, and I think that's a really kind of interesting point that I personally found. So if you're doing all the right measurable things in an online perspective, slowly but surely your credibility online will increase. So I think there's lots of points that link to that offline.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Gary. And yes, offline as well, it takes that time to build that credibility. We can't just instantly get that credibility. So very good. Thank you very much for that. If we could show our appreciation to Gary for that. Thank you. And what we'll do is, I think, we'll hear from Peter and Hannah, and then we'll just see if there's a chance for a couple of questions after that. But if people have got questions, by all means, put them in the chat, and I'm sure Gary can maybe respond to those in the chat as we go through. So fantastic. I'd now like to introduce Peter, who's done a lot of work in this field around reputation, and I believe has some news about a new book as well that he might be having around this subject. So Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. So good morning, everyone. I'll keep this short and sweet. Yes, I have got a new book coming out. I'll mention it towards the end. But I want to basically mention something that happened to me 20 odd years ago. I've been in business 27, 28 years now, something like that. And within about 2 years of starting my business, I spent time with a guy called Peter Thompson. Now, some of you might know Peter. Peter's very well known, very good reputation for many, many years in terms of business development. And he said something to me that really struck home with me, which was, you don't get paid for what you do, you get paid for what you've done. I'll say it again. You don't get paid for what you do, you get paid for what you've done. And it took me a little while to get my head around it, really. But what he was saying was it was all about your reputation. It is all about your credibility. As Kevin is saying this morning, reputation is so important in business. People buy you because of your track record. And obviously, you need to be able to demonstrate that track record. But I think more importantly, you need other people to be saying about your track record, because they're the ones that give you that wonderful thing called referrals. Now, I can't see all of you right this second, but if I asked you to put your hands up, how many of you would like some high quality referrals? I strongly suspect you would all put your hands up, right? Yes, thank you, Granger. Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. So, and in fact, when I stand in front of audiences and say, look, on a scale of 1 low to 10 high, how important is reputation? Everybody puts their hand up and say, it's a 10, it's a 10. Some say it's a 11. Reputation's huge. It's enormous. And as Kevin mentioned earlier, the Gerald Ratner case, his actual phrase was, we sell crap. That was the actual phrase. In social media, if it had been around in those days, that would have been the phrase that went everywhere. Ratner to this day now is a global speaker talking about how he blew it and how he had to rebuild himself, which is fascinating in its own way. So reputation is really important. And to me, there's 4 stages to it. There's reputation creation, which usually is when you're starting your business. Reputation management, the business is moving on and you're trying to manage the process. There's reputation development, where you're trying to grow your business, grow your reputation. And lastly, but not least, reputation recreation. Well, in Ratner's case, definitely recreation, but also, I don't know about you, but I think probably for a number of us in our businesses, for those that run our own businesses, or for those that work inside a business, businesses have a habit of moving all over the place over the years. They rarely start in one place and carry on doing that work 10 years later. Invariably, they've got off on a tangent and started selling stuff, making stuff, or creating stuff, or serving stuff in a very different arena. So our reputation swims depending on how our business swims, if that makes sense. I know in 27 years, my business has swum in many cases, and certainly the family business practice, and some of you are family business practice members here today, which is lovely to see, including obviously Kevin and Caroline, etc. most of us have businesses that moved all over the place, and our reputation has to manage that. Yeah, interestingly, and recently, and at the end of this, I will send you a link to a very simple scorecard. I'll put it up so you can see it, but I'll send you the link to it. That takes 60 seconds just to ask some simple questions of you. And interestingly, very few people have a reputation plan. That's my experience over 27 years. We talk a good game. By the way, I'm not saying I'm perfect, or in previous years I've been perfect. But as life has moved on for me, I've realized that I really did have to have a plan with this. When I've worked with clients, I've realized that while we all talk about the various areas of reputation, we tend to go off onto tangents with it. And this is not a criticism, it's just life. So in other words, you'd start thinking about, well, should I be thinking about PR? Should I be thinking about website? Great presentation, just, for instance, on domain and SEO, etc. And there's all these different things, but reputation's the thing at the top. Reputation's the thing that when you walk through the door, people know, hang on a minute, I know about you. I've heard about you. I was very lucky last night to go to the Professional Speaking Association, to a meeting in Brum that I haven't been to for quite a long time because of COVID and everything else. And I walked through the door, and some of the people, I've known for years. It was nice to see them, but they were talking about me to other people in that event. They were acting as my referral partners. I didn't ask them to. They were being kind, but actually, my reputation was there for them to see. And actually, wouldn't that be great that when you walk into a room, people actually know about you, or they've heard about you? People say, oh, I've heard about the family business practice. That's a lovely thing. Occasionally they say, oh, I've heard of Peter Roper, the family businessman. That's a lovely thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think I'm going to walk through the door and they're going to say, oh, hello, it's James Bond, because no, clearly I'm not. I've got a Brummie accent for a start off, so it's not going to happen, is it? Right? But wouldn't it be great if you had people coming along to you and saying, I've heard about you, I've heard good things about you, or I've been referred to you by such and such. How important is that for you for business? For me, referrals are a lifeblood. They're the thing that really make business tick. And what I want to do, just ever so quickly, if I may, Kevin, is just share the screen for this very simple. Let's just share it. Okay, and hopefully you've got that. So if I just do this. Right, there we go. So if you imagine your business starts, and obviously I'm just doing this line to make it simple. You start your business from scratch. And yes, we all know that it's not a straight line in terms of money and time, but for this example, it's very easy. You start your business off, and over a period of time, you start to get a load of costs first of all, and hope that you can pay the bills. And then after a while, you cross the line where you're not making a loss anymore, and you start making some profit. And you probably start making some profit because you're getting some okay referrals. Again, I can't see you too well, but if I asked all of you, how many of you get a bunch of okay referrals? Well, some people say, I'd be over the moon if I got a referral. Okay. And some would say, well, I get some, but quite often, they're a blind alley. And the reason that they're a blind alley is because the person that referred me didn't do a very good job. Hello, it's your responsibility to make sure people know what you're really looking for. And that's what a reputation plan really does. It qualifies in your brain what you need to do. And then you go out and make the noise in the right places, saying the right things at the right time. Now, it's not necessarily easy, and it's not necessarily a quick fix, but you're talking about a reputation you're trying to create and maintain over a period of time. Brilliant. So therefore, it's really simple. If you want okay referrals, you stick in that area. Whereas the promised land is here, which is brilliant referrals, which give you fab business, bigger profits, better clients, and happy days. Put it another way, I'd like to say clients that appreciate you for what you provide, appreciate and pay you what you're worth, pay you on time, and they're a pleasure to do business with. Those are the people that most of us are really looking for. That's what is really called fab business. And to do that, you have to get across the reputation gap. And the reputation gap is understanding about how to plan this process and produce it. And that's the name of the book that we're bringing out in May. It's in fact a revamp of the book that we produced 11 years ago, but we've updated it, myself and my co-author Leslie Morrissey. And if I just escape this for a second and just bring this into place, you will see, can you all see Solopreneurs, Partnerships and Family Businesses? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a scorecard that I've produced. It's free, takes 60 seconds. I'll put the link in the chat box in a minute.
Perfect.
And that gives you a bunch of ideas from it. It'll also give you access to me for 30 minutes on a one-on-one basis, which is free on me, to talk about how you plan your reputation so you produce a result. Because to me, quite simply, and I'll stop the share, if you don't plan your reputation, if you don't really work on it and make sure that people really understand what you're about, how can you hope to have the type of referrals you really want? So if you want really nice people who appreciate you for what you are, that you enjoy working with, and by the way, they pay you and pay you what you're worth, then it's worth taking the time out and trouble out to create a reputation plan.
Excellent.
Well, that's it. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah. Again, if we, please do put in the chat. And if, again, we could thank Peter. Round of Zoom applause. That'd be great. Thank you very much. Superb. So follow Peter up on that. And that word planning is coming back again, isn't it? And that gap, thinking about it properly. So really, really good. So thank you very much, Peter. Right. And when we're thinking of building that credibility over time, then of course, some of us struggle with what's the difference between marketing and PR. And the way I look at it is marketing is about telling people we're great and trying to sell our products and services, whereas PR is largely building our credibility, managing our reputation, and of course the awareness that goes with it. And that might be a simplistic view, but what I'd like to do now is to hand over to Hannah, who is much more of an expert in the aspects of PR. So Hannah, over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. So my name's Hannah Hatfield, and I run a PR agency in Birmingham called Make More Noise, and we work with lots of different businesses across the Midlands and the rest of the UK in both B2B and B2C market sectors. I'm just going to share my screen. I thought you were going to steal my one-liner, but thankfully you haven't, Kevin. So I describe it as, which I heard, I'm assuming everyone can see that, which I heard from somebody else. I can't even pretend it's my one line, but marketing is like asking somebody to date you, and PR is the reason they say yes. Basically, PR reinforces exactly why somebody should work with you and utilize your products or services, following up from marketing activity, which is obviously marketed to a business and explained exactly what you do. But how exactly can PR get potential customers to say yes? Obviously limited on time, but for us, there's three kind of quick ways in which this can be achieved. Positive PR activity can essentially build a great perception of your brand online. And this kind of ties into what Gary was talking about. So the more positive content you've got published about your business online, particularly via authoritative websites with a higher domain authority, the more your business will dominate the search engine results for relevant search terms. So if you're an accountancy firm in Worcestershire and you've got a nice positive stream of content that's been written and published in media publications, the more likely you will dominate that search term as a result and convert people to not only finding out about your business, but also building credibility and resulting conversions. Positive PR activity can also reinforce buying decisions. So I think we all do this whenever we're buying a new product or service, be it as part of our business or on a personal basis. If you're looking again for accountancy, or if you're booking a holiday, for example, we always look beyond that company website to see what other people are saying about that business, the product, service, or experience. And again, if you've got that consistent positive stream of content online via media publications or referral sites or review sites or whatever it is, then more likely it is that actually you're going to reinforce that buying decision, and those who are looking at your brand and your product or service, it's more likely they're actually going to say yes as a result. Thirdly, positive PR activity can also build obviously credible industry reputation. We all operate obviously in different industry sectors, but it's actually impossible to compete with sort of larger industry players or those who've got a more established reputation without building your own positive credibility and positive industry reputation. It's kind of a question of how you think sort of those larger industry players got there in the first place without their own credibility. Obviously, they would have had some form of excellent scale-up journey implemented by Kevin and the BizSmart team, but obviously credibility would have played a significant part in actually building that reputation in the first place. But like everybody said, so Gary, Peter and Kevin, it actually is something that takes time, commitment and consistency. This is something we actually showed. So we have people who come to us on a regular basis who want to be in the Times, or they want to be in Forbes, or they basically have a goal where they want to be in sort of like a really leading publication, but they've never done any form of PR before and they don't have a credible reputation. The publication certainly doesn't know who they are as a business or as an individual. So we kind of built this kind of graph to demonstrate that it's something that takes a lot of time and commitment and activity. So a base level thing that everybody can do is post consistent content on social media or LinkedIn articles, post consistent blog content, build up sort of a bank of consistent news content or case studies about how you positively work with your customers. And then from after you've kind of built that base level, build up to some kind of more authoritative or thought leadership type activities, such as thought leadership content in comment pieces, newsjacking, which is where if there's sort of a relevant story in your industry or in your sector and you can comment on it and demonstrate your valuable input and that gets published. That's kind of what we call newsjacking, consistent interviews, etc. And then building again to awards and speaking opportunities, and the more you build up here with your activities, so you start about your brand, but then also demonstrate what you know about your sector and your value and what you can deliver to potential clients by demonstrating your knowledge and authority, the more likely is you'll build credibility and trust and engagement and then be listed on Forbes. So a good example that we've got of a client, somebody that I think has spoken well in lots of BizSmart events before, is BBC Apprentice winner Mark Wright. So he has been listed on Forbes, but most recently in October 2022 sold or exited Climb Online for a nice 7-figure sum. And the reason, so he was essentially approached by an agency group who were based overseas in the Philippines, and the reason they approached Mark and Climb Online is because they had credibility and industry reputation in the UK and they wanted to expand in the UK. They saw they'd won a lot of awards, they saw they had a positive reputation in their sector, they had strong brand presence and they had strong brand credibility, and as a result approached them for sale and acquisition, which was obviously successful, and Mark left that business, as I said, in October 22. But without the credibility and the brand reputation, that just wouldn't have happened, essentially, if that makes sense.
Very good. Thank you very much, Hannah. Fantastic. So again, if we could thank Hannah, please, that would be excellent. Good. So we're a bit pushed for time, but I'd quite like to just maybe open up for maybe one question each maximum. All three speakers will be staying on and facilitating breakouts, so there'll be opportunities to catch up with them there, and also obviously you can link up with them separately. But maybe if I just see, is there anybody that's got a burning question for one of our speakers? Maybe either put your hand up physically or digitally using the hands. If not, we'll go straight to our breakouts. I can't see anybody. So that's good. I think they've probably given us everything that we need. Yeah, a great set of, and a different mix. So different ways of looking at credibility, coming at it from different angles, and all together, then that should be helping us to be thinking about how we might build our reputation plan, as Peter was calling it, to bridge that reputation gap or the chasm in the way that I was presenting it with that adoption curve. So really think about it. Brilliant. Good.